Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today to the National Gallery of Zimbabwe, to this one particular exciting moment, which is one of our main series of Harare Conversations. But today I'm very excited to have Philip Chudy. Thank you for coming, and this is your floor to talk to your audience today. This is all yours. Thank you.
Thanks. So I made the title of this to be functionality and in photography versus art. And it was not a very inspiring title. But in a way, it is really what I wanted to talk about. Basically, the question is what is functionality and what is art? Those are the core things that I wanted to enter on. It's very much down to my. Well, I think photography is a very interesting example of an area which defines art, because most of what photography does is not art. Photography's got a lot of very, very simple purposes, I always think in terms of Henry Moore talked about bringing truth to material when it came to sculpture, and it was his idea was that basically if you're carving a piece of wood, that you should make shapes that are compatible with wood. I think in terms of this kind of thing is related to different areas of art or different media. When you think about what photography is suited to, it's first what I call a natural home. The first thing that you want to do with photography is record something. It's a neutral recording medium. It doesn't matter whether it's done by an artist or whether it's done by a machine. But basically, if there's something in front of a lens and in front of a camera, which is interesting in itself, then it makes an interesting photo. So basically, a robot walking around the streets will capture all kinds of interesting things about life. And this is really to my mind, this is the natural home of photography. You have all sorts of possibilities to go beyond that. I mean, as an artist, you can do anything that you want with any medium, and people do. Anyway, I don't think there are many things. So if you're a sculptor or if you're a painter, on the whole, what you're doing is largely an artistic adventure. You're not making a sculpture in necessarily. You could be coerced into making a sculpture to flatter your government or that kind of thing. But on the whole, the main purpose of it is to do something artistic. I think the thing that struck me in terms of working in different countries and different areas of photography is just how different people have approached it and how different fashions have come about. I left Zimbabwe at the age of about 19. I started taking photographs here. I was motivated by basically parts of the country that people had not seen before. I mean, this was a quasi-documentary exercise. I'd never seen a photo of Chimanimani. I went to Chimanimani and took some pictures and thought, well, good pictures or bad pictures, these are somebody somewhere is going to be interested in what is actually over there. I traveled to Europe basically to run away from the Smith regime as a young guy. And I had big ambitions to be an artist. I was more an artist than a photographer at that point. And I arrived and found that the prevalent art scene that was happening there at the time was somehow, as far as I was concerned, this was bored with visual things. It was bored with ideas. It was basically, the modernists had done an aesthetic exercise with art, and the next generation came along and seemed to think, well, we can't just do pretty things in nice, interesting colors. We have to be seen to be doing something useful. So it was largely, let's protest the nuclear war, let's talk about homeless people. So basically the European ideal had changed from something rather aesthetic to discovery to being a functional application of the artistic world. And of course, photography is way more suited to that. I mean, you have this very this distinction amongst photographers, which is that your artistry is going to be something inadvertent. You're going to go out and photograph bugs, or you're going to photograph birds, and somehow or other, if you do it right, somehow it's going to become art. But your main thrust as a photographer is to do this thing that you have in mind. And so, when I first arrived in Europe, I was disillusioned by the art scene, and I thought, I don't really want to be part of this. I then saw what was happening in advertising. And basically, in advertising, people had purpose. They had budgets. They had a lot more talent than what I saw in art galleries. And I thought that this was pretty interesting. The techniques used, the concepts behind the stuff seemed to be great compared with what artists were doing. And that interested me for quite a while. In the advertising world, you are trying to achieve something straightforward. You've got a basis to be judged. I mean, ultimately, you're trying to sell somebody's products. If you reach people, there's immediate, you can say there's success. You get rewarded for it. Whereas what took me a long time to realize was that the main issue is that what everything is being done for. If you're involved in advertising, if you're involved in propaganda, it's convenient, you can measure it, but there's no real mystery. The question of why the person did what they did was not really in question. It wasn't a mystery. In the advertising world, we thought, well, somebody wants me to take a picture of a car. I could do a boring picture of a car. It would sell the car just as well. Or I could do something really special. And my component, my creative component was making this thing look better. And then you could justify yourself in a social sense. You could say, well, people are seeing these posters all over town, and if they're horrible posters, it's uninspiring. I mean, they're going to be sold this car anyway. And so let's use the advertiser as a sponsor we'll convince him to do something creative, nice light, nice composition, all of these little bits and pieces, and that's going to be the reward for society, which is to please them. That's not a tremendously, it's a short-term kind of ambition or reward, because basically, still, it's not really a question of why is this thing being done, which led me to think, what is actually how do you define the difference between art and many of the other applications? So the other applications are, the kind of things that are functional. You can create what looks like gallery art. It's not necessary, I'm not being that strict to say that something is not art because it was done for a purpose. But in general, if it's serving a function and it was meant to serve a function, you can broadly say that that's its main reason for living. And so it could be flatter somebody's ego. People like beautiful sculpture. It looks good in their living room. It looks good in their city. It makes them look avant-garde. These kind of things are functional use. It could be that it pushes a certain philosophy, and you can always say, well, it's a laudable thing that I'm pursuing. Basically, help the poor. Who can criticize that? But largely, that again, it's readable. This is the purpose why this thing is being done. Question is, if you take away most of this function and most of the purpose to this, you get less and less that you can touch with your hands. So the way I see it, basically art is an inquiry into what art is, or there are a number of different ways of putting it. It is it's a search for meaning. It's not. Again, the thing that I found when I arrived in Europe in that particular era was people were saying, well, our role as an artist is to teach people stuff. The assumption is that all the people are stupid and we know what we're talking about. It's to bring things that the people don't have to them. It's all very laudable, but it's still an arrogant type of an activity. I think mostly my definition of art is that it's largely a pursuit of why on earth am I doing this, and it's in a fairly pure sense. It gives no rewards because if you have the answers, you know what you're doing. If you don't have the answers, then basically people look at you and say, well, what are you doing? Why are you trying to do all of this stuff and you don't know what it is and you get no reward for it? But so behind all of that, if one's trying to apply a little bit of a sort of high-level value to this, if you think about it, how we perceive things defines how we process information, defines how we formulate political ideals, and so on. And if you look at something which is read and you respond to it, it's the real thing as an artist that you can be exploring is, why do I respond to something read? What does it mean? It's not necessarily that you get answers for it. It's that you're asking the questions. And I think the thing about photography is the reason that it's interesting is because you never know. Is it something to do with art or is it not to do with art? This is one of those things where you can't help as a photographer, you can't just live with your ideas. You basically have to find something to photograph. So as you know, in the first party side of things, it's a question of motivation. You can't sit in a room which has nothing in it and take great photographs. So if you're going to go out and take photographs of something, then you choose. You know, I like mushrooms, I like riots, I like world wars, you know, I like happy, you know, so you choose a project. You can't help by doing that. So it makes it, you know, the photography becomes quite difficult because there you are, you've chosen something. And now suddenly it's a kind of a label, you know, it's very easy. One thing that you find with photographers pretty much everywhere, and also with society, is the suggestion that the photographer, well, a lot of things with art, I suppose, boiling down to it, is that you have it's a controlled insanity. People are wanting to find out what happens if you're free from all the other things in life. What happens if you look at ants on the ground, and this interests you your whole life? You're interested in just the ants. I mean, what kind of insight are you going to get on life if you just, in a manic fashion, you focus on one little thing? And somehow other people think in terms of, I guess it's some kind of an instinct, that if somebody does one thing their whole life, they're going to become experts. We're going to end up with a society of people who really know ants. And what happens if somebody really knows something really well? This sort of thing happens with photographers. You end up, oh, I photograph dogs, people walking dogs. And there's another person walking a dog, I have to go and take a picture. And there's another person walking a dog, I have to take another picture. And there's always this dream that I'm going to make the perfect picture of a person walking their dog. So there's an attraction to this kind of a thing, but in some ways it's sad in a way. I mean, really, the thing is that if you have some good pictures of people walking dogs, maybe you should think of something else. But as a photographer, I mean, as a musician, I think you probably noticed that most musicians, their entire life, they have one song. If they're a really good musician, they have 3 songs. They play, you know, a different way, but it's the same song. It's just a different variation. If you, as a photographer, if you change, you know, if the question is, are you functioning as a photographer for the question of art, or are you functioning in order to service an audience? An audience a lot of the time is going to say, we're comfortable with your pictures of ants. There's this guy I know, he takes pictures of ants. It's predictable. You know, come and take more pictures of ants. How are your ants pictures getting on? But suddenly you were photographing cockroaches. Oh no, something's wrong. Something's happening. Yeah, I think the trap that's happened a lot with photography is that people had to choose something, and they choose what's available. You can choose politics, you can choose wildlife, you can choose portraits, but you still have to choose something. And there's this belief that if you, whatever it is that you're doing, there's some ancillary thing that's going to come into it, which is going to be your real contribution. It's not really the ants that I'm photographing, it's the light and the feeling and the moment in time and so on. Yeah, there's a temptation to be stuck with something as a photographer. I think that's, you know, that makes it more interesting in a way than, you know, an artist who puts a black dot onto a white canvas. That's their thing. there's not really an incentive to change. The thing about photography is that there's a little bit of a pressure that builds up on you based on your subject matter. So the question is are your photographs that good, or is the stuff you're photographing that interesting? And if the stuff you're photographing is more interesting than the way you photograph it, it's kind of like you don't own that guy. You know, it's a it's a thing that comes back. So just another point to do with the question of art versus functionality is that art is supposed to be something that is personal. It's supposed to be that you feel something to do with your subject matter, if it's photography, and it couldn't really be done by a machine. So there's some kind of a relationship. And then if you're servicing an audience, then the audience also wants to say, well, what did you do? I mean, you know, you turned up somewhere and you pressed the shutter. You know, anybody could have done it. Where's the artistry? What's it got to do with you? I mean, you're supposed to be producing magic for us. Well, the temptation is to say, no, I depersonalize myself. I'm neutral. I'm a pure heart. I photograph what's there without imposing my interpretation on it, which doesn't really satisfy an audience very much, because what did you do? I noticed when I first went to Europe from here, in terms of photography, there was a big thing that. So I took pictures of bush stores and traveling the countryside here. And these were black and white. They were not flattering pictures of anything. They were in the style of American large formats, the Ansel Adams and Win Bullocks. It was trying to use a big camera to photograph what was there in such a way that it was larger than life. And I was met by people in the galleries there who said, why don't you go and see a travel agent? As far as they were concerned, this was too neutral for them. This wasn't art. Their interest at the time was, let's put our finger on what you did as a photographer. It was, you are photographing homeless people. You were part of sort of a soccer interest, a football interest group. You know, you are basically lending yourself to something which then has purpose. So the suggestion really was that photographer is not really a photographer unless he attaches himself to an existing movement. It's rather difficult, but it's possible to say that photography is an activity where you can be exploring lots of things without attaching to something. Necessarily, you can't get away from it. You need a subject matter. So if you photograph, you know, everybody. The point is, what your audience wants from you and what you do are two separate things. So if you're photographing dogs, but you're really questioning the nature of visual reality, people are going to say he photographs dogs. This is his thing. And so I think the dilemma with photography also is also in the modern times how many people have decided that whatever they're doing is art because there's some inadvertent throw-off from it. And therefore, you know, the modern idea is everybody's an artist and doesn't matter what you do. It's all an exploration, it's all valid, and there's something artistic that comes out of it. And the question that you really have to ask yourself as the photographer is whether or not whether what you're doing is valid or not. Now, which is a contradiction, because what you're trying to do is find out whether what you're doing is valid. So if you, the main thing I think at the end of all of this, which is really probably mostly my point, is that if you are arrogant and you feel like, or narcissistic, and you feel like whatever it is that I do has meaning and therefore it's valuable, maybe you're not doing it. So, yeah, I largely made that point. I don't know if anybody got any questions or comments. Yeah.
Yes, you said that depends on. Yes, you said that depends on the subject and the public doesn't transform the art into a commercial action. So you were saying the explanation about the dog and using as an explanation. You said prior to that it depends on the subject and the people that you want to impact with. So my question is, doesn't that betray the work?
Well, it betrays something in the work. I guess the point that I haven't really made is that how valid is all the stuff that is not art? Or if you want to put it that way, or how valid is everything which is not all that artistic? And the point about functionality in photography is that it can be incredibly valuable. It's incredibly valuable commercially, it's invaluable scientifically, it's invaluable sociologically. All of these things are really important. They don't necessarily have to be anything to do with art. There's a bandwagon where you can say, oh, I'm an advertising photographer, I photograph fashion, and I'm an artist. Well, maybe, but maybe you're not much of an artist. You're a valuable person in society. I mean, I think the thing is that there's so much stuff which is really important, not just with photography. I mean, nowadays, in the old days, you could say anything that was done with paint on a canvas was going to be art, because it didn't really serve much of a purpose. It may be hung up on somebody's room and it did something aesthetically, or maybe it was spiritually stimulating. So you just said that this was an exploration, whatever it is by definition. Whereas nowadays you have thousands of companies selling you home decorations. You have people with scientific thing who are discovering, certain sounds that are going to make you happier or more productive. Color schemes, the architecture of your building is going to be, stimulating. It's done in sort of using artistic type things. It's using colors and form and composition and so on. But it's functional. It's serving a purpose. I don't know how. What kind of things? There are lots of photographers here in the audience. What kind of stuff are people doing? And is it aimed at galleries, or is it aimed at commercial work? Do we have photographers here in the group? Yeah. So who do you see as being the users of your work, or the people who I mean, do you have a target audience for the people that you make photos for? Yeah, go on.
I take pictures for news and target for that. Be a target for who's going to receive that. Those pictures, who's going to use those pictures? Are they going to be once-off uses? Are they going to be pictures that will be referred to over and over? Yeah. So I'm quite clear sometimes about the audience that I have for those images. Yeah.
So this is incredibly consequential. If it's news, if it's any aspect of news, it involves. So if you're a photographer who's simply exploring human expression, you're going to look at what makes a happy face, what makes a miserable face. You're going to be taking into account all of the things that you see around you. If you're a news photographer, you're going to be, first of all, referring to the discoveries of people who've explored the meaning of visual stuff, but you're going to be using it for a purpose. You're going to communicate what's happening in the world. It's probably 50 times more important than what an artist is doing. Depends on your situation. I mean, as a photographer, you always depend on whether you've got something nice to photograph or important to photograph. But if it's important, it's incredibly significant. But I think the thing about the artistic side of things is we learn lots of things, not just from artists and photographers, but supposedly the language of human expression is universal. I think recently they've taken all kinds of societies around the world and tested different facial expressions. And you don't have a society where you have that, which means that you're happy. Pretty much everybody agrees. But there are lots of things which become cultural. So whether an artist has explored what do I feel about arm gestures, and they end up producing a bunch of sculptures, and then you become familiar with the sculpture that does this, and then one day you see somebody on the street in a riot or whatever it is who is doing this. Now suddenly you are putting these things together. The artist who's doing the early work in terms of just trying to understand what perception, trying to figure out, is happiness really happiness, or is it something else? I mean, why should I accept many of the things that are put out to us? It makes it. A lot of people do a lot of different kinds of photography, and a lot of people say you should just stick to one thing. But I mean, for example, with my work, I've always figured that. Well, getting back to this thing I didn't quite finish earlier about arriving in Britain, finding that the galleries wanted me to take my pictures to a travel agent. Okay. Oh, good. So this is a bit of an intro. I can find one or two things here. I prepared a slideshow, which was random, which is not working on this computer. I wasn't really coming to show off my work. It's available on the internet. But yeah, so there was a thing amongst the photo gallery people, which was that if you go out there and photograph the mountains or poor people or rich people, you're basically a thief. This is a common piece of reality. Everybody owns it. We could all look at it. And you went along and you took a picture of it. You didn't make anything, and now you're trying to sell us your prints. There was a bit of a dilemma, especially in the British mentality. People wanted to, as far as they were concerned, if I'm an audience, I have to make a judgment. I look at something and I have to say it's good or bad. It does something for me. It does something for humanity. It does something, and the big thing with photography is does it reveal anything that the photographer should I say it's a great photograph? What a shame about the photographer. The photographer is nobody, but the photo is great. But if they're going to say, well, bring you on the stage because he's a great photographer, they want to know, what did you do? And the solution at that time was, to a large extent, make something. Then there's no question about it. So go down to the beach, and I find some pieces of wood, and I put them in the sand, and then I sprinkle some shells on it, and I wait for the waves to come in, and when it's all just perfect, I take a photo of it. And nobody can say, I just went there and did it, because I made that. I made this thing. The big thing in advertising was, wow, somebody wants a picture of a Lamborghini on the top of a skyscraper with wonderful people in clothing. I organized it. I got all the models together. I chose them. We flew them in from Los Angeles. We had stylists. We had everything. This thing wouldn't have existed without me. And so, give me the credit for this. The same kind of thing with news is the kudos. I went to this war zone. I put my life in danger. So even if my pictures are crap, you have to tell me that I'm a great guy because of the terrible scenario I went through. That's one of those things that's very tempting in photography. And it's rather difficult to say, well, I'm going to make a bunch of pictures, return, nobody knows what I did. It's not really clear. But still, the pressure is there. You have, that's another thing which I think is worth saying about photography, is that largely, if you're a painter, you have your signature, you've got your way of moving your wrist when you paint the stuff, or a sculptor, a certain style of something, which reveals it as your work. With the photographer, if you have the best equipment and you wander out into the streets and take pictures, I get one great picture where we have a car accident and a bunch of people falling down from the building, all in one picture. It's never been seen before. It's one of the greatest pictures in history. It all happened in the same moment. I was there. Well, you can say I was there, but even so, people still want to say, well, it doesn't make you a great photographer. You were there, but maybe you weren't there another time. So what people want to do is they want to see a bunch of pictures, and they slowly want to build up a picture as to what is your eye like, what is there that is yours. And it means that you have to communicate through a mass of things. People have to know you more. If you think of Da Vinci, everybody's going to say he's the great painter, and then ask people, how many paintings of Da Vinci have you seen in your life? 3, 4. Basically, you just accepted it. You didn't need to see 500 pictures. You saw 1 or 2 that represented something for you. And so photography is a little bit different. And then within photography, so what is there anybody here who does contrived photography in any way? I mean, nowadays everybody retouches and does Lightroom effects and jazzes up their pictures. I mean, what is the has anybody got any thoughts as to how it works with processing imagery? No? Oh, yeah.
All right, so mine is a bit of an after question to that.
Yeah.
So the bit of a question, I had the question earlier, but then you pushed on later on. So the question was that how you said art is personal, right? And as a photographer and like reading your bio and also going through your work, I've seen you've traveled. So how much of other people's personalities can you take into your work, but also remain personal. Just because I recently did an exhibition in New York a few weeks ago, and my photograph, just like what you were saying, is I just capture moments and freeze moments. There's not much of mine that's there, but it's just seeing a perfect opportunity, then you freeze it in time. Then you go over there, like they retouch, they superimpose things in images, but then you see that and you like it just because you see also that that's what people over there are liking, and you also like what the other side that life, right? So how much of yourself can you sacrifice to remain personal in your work, but also take other art forms in mind, like that then includes the retouching that you just asked about? So what compromise, and to what lengths can you compromise to remain the same person, but to also let your art evolve?
Thanks. Yeah, I think, well, the first, the behind your question is really a question of, you're considering the audience, you're considering your position, you're considering your market. The thing about being in terms of, I hate the word in terms of pure art, but it's really nothing to do with any of that. It's really a question of, I always make a joke about British people who like privacy, and they stress privacy, and the Swiss are even worse. But I always make a say that the joke is that you ask a British person what they think about something, and it's none of their business what they think. They're not going to ask themselves, what do I think? It's private. I don't have access to what I think about life. So it's a joke, but to a certain extent, as an artist, what you're trying to do is you're trying to find out. You don't know what is personal. It's not a question. You can't measure any of that. You're not going to get any results. If you're talking in terms of a career, look. So what I was saying was that this is all nothing to do with the art is really nothing to do with marketing and finding results. I didn't stress that enough. Was that in terms of the concept, the idea that you make a successful piece of art, it's almost by definition not successful if it's successful, because you've made something. It's revealed. There's no longer the mystery anymore to do with it. On the other hand, life is a little bit more complicated, and so some things you can try and put your personal feelings into something. That's not the object of the exercise, but it's what you're doing. Just like as a photographer, you're going out there and choosing to photograph ants on the street. It's what you're doing, but the results aren't. You're not going to get the results from that. So, while doing that, while trying to find something about yourself, it's the other stuff that you discover when you start discovering all the questions that you have. But in terms of an audience, that's a valid question, because the functionality of photography is also to keep you alive, sell work or sell your pictures. You can ask that kind of a question. Well, then you're taking into account your audience. Well, what happens with the audiences? I think there are a number of things that I've been reading and listening to in terms of neuroscientists and so on. There are many people who are taking the approach that any given society seems to have value for a few crazy people. They are very valuable to them. They either become prophets or artists, but not too many of them. Each community has only enough stomach to choose one or two people to be those kind of people. And they're generally saying that if you look at the qualities that these people have, it's pretty much, most people would be locked up if they behaved like them or talked like them. But those small number of people, they get paid lots of money, they get put on a stage, they get loved. And I mean, this is the other side to this function. You can make it your quest in life, to find out what does it feel like to be famous. Well, first you have to be famous, and then you have to do what your audience wants to make you famous, and then you can say, well, now I'm doing my thing. You can't call me fake, because my experiment is to find out what it feels like to be a cool guy and that everybody likes me. So in terms of your audience, how much is you? I mean, it's really down to them. I mean, what do you sense of, I mean, do they tell you you've got something personal in your work, I can see it in your work? Or do you tell them it's here even if you can't see it?
Maybe with the sequence of images that I think this is what you like, maybe you like the human emotion, by the amount of images that you take, then they get to pick that.
But are you asking them, or are you asking yourself?
In conversations that in walkthroughs, you get to hear that sentiment being thrown around, that I like how you capture the human emotion, that the next person sees that. So you then take it on you to say, maybe this is actually what I'm impressed of.
Do you believe them? Do you believe that impression? I mean, or do you just say, like many people do, is if they pay money for it, that's all I need to know, if they're paying money for it. At which point lots of people, the successful people will say that, oh, I was popular for the wrong reasons, nobody understands me. There's one thing that I heard. Does everybody know Bonnie Raitt, the rock and roller? She's from the part of the Bay Area where I am. She is she was one of the early big shot rock and rollers. She was actually a friend of Mapfuma, and actually pushed her out of the way to talk to him when he came to San Rafael once. But she presented a movie of some guy who was he was a peer of Bob Dylan. A lot of people seem to think that Bob Dylan owed him a considerable amount for the kind of music he played, except that this guy didn't want fame. And he largely ended up where Bonnie Raitt was supporting him when he had a heart attack because he had no money to look after himself. But in this movie about this guy was that at one point he stopped playing music for 10 years. He suddenly said, I play this run of notes, and the audience start crying. And I didn't do any emotion there. I just played this cynical bunch of notes, and everybody starts crying. And he said, well, how can I take any credit? I mean, how can I feel like I'm entertaining the audience, they're responding to me? It's just a mechanical thing. So, I mean, if you wandered around and you took pictures of, which is many people out here are going to say the same thing. I walk around the streets on this journey, and there are lots of people saying, yeah, you're coming here to photograph poor people so you can show it off in Europe. I could just say, okay, I just take pictures of poor people that I'm going to enjoy in Europe. Everybody's going to say, well done. But, I have no involvement with the people necessarily. If I did, then maybe I would feel different. But I don't know whether the audience knows the difference between my pictures of poor people and my pictures where I related to the poor people. I think that's a lot harder. Do you think that it's your duty as a photographer to try and bridge this gap between what you feel and what you photograph?
It would be, because I think generally what I'm doing right now, I'm calling it digital storytelling. So maybe there's a prerogative from my end to then now tell their story according to how I feel like the images are portrayed. So maybe to a degree, I would agree to that.
So I had a friend, maybe people here knew him. He went to, he's passed away now, unfortunately, but we went on a lot of journeys together. And I took most of my early work was done with a big plate camera. So it meant that it was a very slow process to take pictures. It was very sharp, so basically I could happily take a picture of people with the environment and get to see all the detail, lots of little figures. And we traveled all over Gokwe and Tuli, and we went many places together. And so I took these, I should find one or two of them. I took many of these pictures, but I felt like I had some kind of a connection because I was patient. I mean, if we're talking about how many years ago, 35, 40 years ago, as a white guy going out into Gokwe, nobody knew who you were, so if you just arrived and said, do this, and maybe some people would obey because he's a white guy. So if you went there and you talked to people for a long time, then you could feel like you had some rapport with them. And I think in my photos, everybody's willingly posing. I never asked anybody to stand in my picture. So I felt like this is portraying something. However, my friend went around with a 35mm camera, and he took lots of pictures of easy stuff. Now, if we went afterwards and I wanted to say to somebody, oh, we went to, you know what it's like in the back end of Gokwe, my pictures didn't tell the story of what it was like there. His pictures were better than mine. At the same time, many of the pictures that I did in Europe, I had no identification with European landscape. I didn't feel that it was part of me. I spent quite a few years living in London. I never took any pictures. I did advertising pictures, but I didn't do any pictures for aesthetic reasons. Because I felt it's not my country, it's not my place, I don't have any relationship with it. And then later I moved to Scotland, and it started to be somewhere where I felt something with it. And also I felt like, you know, in Europe everybody they have all these established things, the cathedrals and the beautiful Rhine walk next to the river and the castles and all this history. And I couldn't be bothered to. Those things are there for tourists to see. They don't need me to take a photo of it. So I didn't take any pictures of that. In the end, I went wandering around and said, well, apart from those things, what does Europe represent? A bunch of backends of factories, dismal, boring suburbs, lifeless, soulless places. And so I took pictures of that kind of thing. I felt like this is what I can relate to. But, you know, now in the USA, I show pictures of my European urban landscapes, and people say, I've been to Europe, and it doesn't look anything like your photos. So I don't know what the result is. This kind of thing. I don't know. I think to a large extent what you have to expect with photography is that it's a lie. It's a lie on a lot of levels, and that's one of the things that you start to think about. I mean, to be a good photographer, you're producing something rather that has no context. It's on a screen or on a wall. And if you're somewhere, there are the smells of the market, and there's the noises, and you're looking all around and you're seeing all the action. If you want to take a picture that works quite well on the wall, what you really need is a switch in your brain which says, I forget everything. I've forgotten the smell, all I'm looking at is what is here. And if you're trying to make a judgment, is that worth taking the picture, or do you cut out everything else? So by definition, you have to have a very poor memory on purpose. And by definition, having a poor memory is not really being part of the place. I mean, being in real life is part of a continuum. On the other hand, when you have a movie, well, I always think, so I have a big pile of albums on the computer, and I look at the names. Jimi Hendrix, which one is that? I can't remember. What do I remember is the album cover. So the human memory somehow or other remembers the picture. You have a movie. Oh, was that the one where but you remember the poster. So there's something about still pictures being part of the way the brain remembers stuff. It's iconic and represents a lot of other things. So I don't know, it's important. But life is not a frozen moment of something. It continues the moment before and after. When you watch a movie, you don't really remember the scenes. It's all part of some big experience. So I don't know. I mean, I think that still photography is pretty important in a way that most people don't expect, but it's a lie. I mean, it's a symbol of something. And probably the lie is however you associate it. That was the time when we had a lot of fun. We didn't look at all the people who weren't having fun, but I choose to use that picture to represent something or other. It means something to me, but I don't know. I think, however, generally that still photographers, you can say a lot more by a lifetime of photos or a series of photos. And that one picture, which everybody says was the best picture in history, it's kind of what's in their mind. It's not really the truth. What's the most memorable picture that you can think of?
My work or generally?
No, just generally, of what you've seen in life. Does any picture come to mind for you?
Yeah, there is. There's this one that was taken by this documentary photographer about a kid. I think kid at crossover, and there's a vulture that's standing and feeding the child. I think that to me that's the most striking image that I've seen.
Yeah, to me the image, which I don't like, but is that the guy executing somebody in Vietnam. You remember that picture where one of the South Vietnamese gets this guy who maybe was accused of something. He says to the cameraman, "Look, I can just pull the trigger and shoot him." That's a memorable thing. There's another thing, just talking about what's interesting in photos on a technical level. Just like that, I didn't mention the name of that musician. He's Spider John Kerner. Who was the one who gave up music for those years. But I went to the Exploratorium in San Francisco, and they have a machine that follows your eyes. And they use the machine to broadcast a laser pattern which remains onto a wall where they have a picture. So as you stand there, you can see, oh, my eyes did this. They're moving very fast all the time. And I don't know if you know, but basically your human vision is only sharp for an area about that big, at arm's length. The rest of this, the lens is terrible. The only way that you think that you've seen something in detail is because your eyes move and they leave behind a brain scan of everything that they've seen. So a moment ago I looked at the window there, and now when I look here, I still remember what the details are there, but it's not because my eyes see it. So the eye never stops. It's moving incredibly fast all over the place. And they showed this bunch of pictures, And you could say, oh, look, there's the guy, look at his funny hair. So your eye goes around and looks at his hair. Then it gets a bit bored and you say, oh, look at his sleeve, it's got a tear in it. Look down at his sleeve, and then you get bored and then you look at his shoes, and then look at something else. And then I suddenly realized what makes this mysterious photo, similar to Kerner, this mysterious photo which has endless meaning, is that it's not a picture like the guy shooting the guy. That's one picture. You've seen it all in one moment. There's nothing else to look at. It doesn't, nobody else on the street. What really makes a picture last as an artistic thing is that it's not that interesting. You look at the guy's hair and it's interesting, it catches your eye, but you get bored. You go to something else, you get bored. You go to something else in the picture, you get bored. Then you go back again, because by then you've forgotten. And if you can get a picture where your eye circulates, and it just seems mysterious. I never quite understand this picture, because whereas if any one of those parts was more important than the other ones, we would have said, I've seen the picture, I saw the point of that picture. But I'm just intrigued by it because so I think that's a fairly cynical thing to do with composition of photos. And the same kind of a thing about your subject matter. I mean, on a series of photos, you never quite capture if you had 3 pictures that were perfect, the rest of them, everybody would say, throw them away, or we don't want to see them. You're not an artist, you've got 3 nice pictures. But if you've got 50 pictures and nobody quite gets what's in all 50 of them, they all look at them and they nearly get it, move on to another one. There's a feeling of building up emotion and so on, which I think is quite useful. I mean, that's the cynical view of it. Beyond that point, it's a question of is there any real meaning, which probably is really down to the politics and the minds of the people who are looking at it. So, in terms of your photography, your news photography, do you find some pictures which are magical to you, which stand out from the rest, or are they all dependent on your story? I mean, if it's last week's story, is the picture no good anymore?
Yeah, that's interesting because so that's interesting because sometimes when you go to a story, you're literally going for a series of pictures, because those series of pictures tell the story that you've been assigned to tell. But as you're taking pictures during that, you're actually seeing other pictures that are of interest, but not necessarily pictures that you're going to publish, but pictures that speak to you, but not newsworthy, let's say. But so I've got an Instagram account, and my Instagram account, you would imagine, would be a newsworthy Instagram account, but it's literally an account that has pictures that have no real use in news, on a front page or anywhere else. But they are pictures that strike me, perhaps in their composition or the moment, but they're not pictures that somebody would take and say, oh, this is now a news picture. But I took it during a news event, if you like.
I'm just coming here to the personal microphone. Yeah, so do you think that, do you find, for example, the people who look at your Instagram account, do they respond to that? I mean, do you find a satisfaction? Do you think that This is the real stuff. That's the real me. Whereas the other stuff was just doing my job. Is it something or other that you find
Yeah.
long-lasting and satisfying?
Yeah, so I get a lot more satisfaction from response to images that I would have that would not be newsworthy, but I'm not gonna say cherish. But yeah, so I the feedback from those kind of images are interesting to me more than, oh, we saw your picture and it was mine disaster or the thing and the thing, because
What
those
about
are technical.
quantity?
Sorry?
What about quantity? I mean, do you shoot hundreds of those kind of pictures and fewer of the other ones? I mean, I ask this question because there's, I think her name is Joelle Dupont, who's on Instagram. I think she takes photos with her phone. She takes about 10 good pictures. She's got a fantastic eye. She takes pictures of everything that she passes in the street, funny people and so on. Of all the people that I look at, I think her work is, her eye is fantastic. At the same time, she produces 10 or 15 pictures every day. And at the end of that, there's some kind of a thing in my head which says she can't edit them down to, you know, in other words, is there somebody rather who's just a good eye machine but doesn't understand what's, so, you know, the question is what is going on and how can I process that? And I wonder in terms of, you know, I've shot millions and millions of pictures and people each kept, the constant thing with photography is that everybody says, edit it down. Show us your 5 best pictures. Well, I don't like my 5 best pictures. I'm sick of them. And also I don't want to edit it down. But it's true, they can't process 100 million pictures.
So to speak back to that, sometimes I'll go where I'm not assigned. Yeah. And I find I take a lot more pictures that satisfy me because I'm not assigned.
Yeah.
I'm not going there to satisfy your 5 pictures that you want from me and that I know how to give to you. So if I'm on assignment, I'm always trying to outdo my 5 best pictures. So I keep taking. But perhaps I keep taking the same kind of thing until I get into the 5 best. But if I'm not assigned and I'm just doing what I feel and what I see and what I like, I tend to take a lot more pictures that are not going to be too useful news-wise, but that I find interesting.
But in long term, are you able to process them? Or you simply put them in a drawer? There's 5 million pictures I shot in the last 5 years.
I think because of Instagram, now I can put 1 or 2 up, but they're sort of, because of where I work or what I do, they're like, but so how would you take such a picture? Because it's not. So if it wasn't for Instagram, probably no one would see them. Yeah.
Including yourself.
Well, and at the same time, all these people who are sick of Instagram, we don't see them anyway. Who go through Instagram and they say, "Oh, I saw it. I think you did a picture of." Yeah. I don't know. There's processing power of lots of images. It's too a little bit affected by the desire to bring things down. This sculpture thing that I brought. This was an attempt that I made. I still can't really understand this thing. I made this years ago as an attempt to try and understand lines of thought. And I kept thinking that you try and understand something and you are either building up more information as you understand more, or you're taking a lot of information and you're trying to bring it down to make a decision. And I had this impression that whatever you're trying to process, you try and we're designed in such a way that we will try to make something cathartic. You try to make a conclusion, you try to get to a point where I understand, I know what's going on. And the thing about it is that it's a bit of a myopic process, that while you're trying to figure things out, you kind of become blind to lots of things. And so I made this thing here by saying, okay, here I am, I'm starting here, and I'm aiming for some quality over here. This will be transcendence or something like that. And as I work towards it, I build up my information. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then thinking in terms of Eastern religion, when you supposedly understand everything, is you get to a point of nirvana where you feel like you are one with the universe. Everything makes sense. There's also a thing like such as an Eastern religion that you might think good and bad are separate things, but when you achieve nirvana, you realize that they're connected. So in the sculpture here, you start out here going towards something. It gets bigger and bigger. It should go to infinity. Information should, what's the reason? I want to go and make a cup of tea. What is the argument for and against? So you come with two arguments, and then what are the arguments behind them? There are more arguments behind them. So eventually this builds up. In theory, it should involve everything in the entire universe. But because I'm so limited, it stops long before then. But when you get up to here, it feels very big. But at this point also, it's connected right through to the opposite. And while you were going this way, you were separated from everything here. So you thought that good and bad were complete opposites. They had no relationship. You thought this could be, you're trying to aim towards there are any parameters that you could put to this. But the thing that this was trying to explain was that whatever you do, there's also a different point of view in this. And I think it probably means a little bit more. Does anybody know Arthur Koestler? He wrote The Act of Creation. And he basically postulated that everything from understanding and religious experience down to a joke is when two lines of thought, which normally were not connected, they go past each other and they collide. Suddenly you realize this and this are connected. It's at that moment that it suddenly feels magic, because you understand something. When you have photos which are meaningful for you, there's always a similar kind of a thing. There's what do you see in front of you and what does it represent? Its meaning is a combination of two things. Your personal Instagram pictures mean something in relation to your personal experience. To somebody else, maybe they don't. But you're only giving them one half of this formula. Anyway, what this was meant to do was just basically to say that whatever viewpoint you make, there's this point of view which comes to it in a different angle, and that point of view, and that it's like a yin-yang symbol, that two opposites balance. But this has quite a few more different dimensions to it. So I don't know if it's any use. I often sort of half understand what I was trying to do and find it a useful thing. Do you have any? So go on.
No, I don't have a question. Can you read the system focus?
Okay. Let's see. I prepared a slideshow which doesn't work on this machine, which was going to be random. So I'm just going to have to find a couple of a few random galleries. Oh, what? It's not working. Yes, it's going to work. No. So So there should be a slideshow of some urban landscapes when it comes. Pedal power. Come on. Maybe I should just go for a smaller picture. So, I don't know, this is not very impressive on the screen, but this is just a few. There are a couple of things that I've been drawn to, which were urban landscapes. Nothing changing? Should be changing. Should it just do it by hand? Try one more time. One of the big things that influenced me with photography was starting off pre-digital, using big plate cameras. I don't know if anybody here worked with film previously, but this is not going manually. Yeah.
I have a question. So this pertains to Zimbabwean culture in terms of photography.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a Zimbabwean photographer, and my focus is on not only just taking nice photos, but photos that represent or sort of speak for the nation, if I were so to speak. I feel like no matter how much I keep on searching for photos that tell the story of the nation, I hardly find stories that tell stories of the nation, the people, their lifestyles, who they are, what they do. And 3/4 of the time you have people that come in and they have their perspective of who we are and what we do and all of that. So my question is, if I want to tell a story about people, should I then interrupt that story with how I view my people and how they live? Like you said, photography is all about perspective. Or should I just take what I see and put it out there? So my question is, does my perspective pollute the photo? Or should I just take a photo, put it out there, see what people say about it?
Well, I think there's it's just an opinion, but I think if you understand something and there's a degree of I mean, if there's freedom in your personality, you can't help but include the stuff that you want to. The point about it is that whatever you're including in there, so if you're a professional photographer, you're being asked, this is why professional photographers have been paid so much money in the past, not because somebody else couldn't do a better picture, but because they're being asked to come on Wednesday, regardless of the weather, to get the picture that does whatever it is. And if that involves spending thousands of dollars and building backdrops and employing people, whatever it is, their experiences, and they are expected to intentionally bring some stuff to it. And of course, you know, it's the bull in the advertising world is also that you have that je ne sais quoi, and you're expected to bring more than that to it. But basically, you're being asked to perform. If you're asking yourself to perform, then you're making your life dependent on what you already know. There's not that much point in it. I mean, okay, if somebody's putting you on the spot, or you're an old guy and it's your last 3 years to take pictures, then yeah, maybe you want to master that. Beyond that, you know, half of what you're going to photograph is discovery. You know, these are well, you know, the question is, how much do you appreciate the things? It might feel like a lot to you, but could it be more? So you're going to come along, and whatever level of familiarity you have with the people you're photographing, that's going to show through, but you're also going to discover yet more things. You're going to find out much more in the process of taking the pictures. And that's, for me, is the most valuable thing that makes, so you start out with a named project, which is, I want to photograph my people, and somebody could say, okay, that's not really art, he's just doing a job. The unknown part of it, the discovery part of it, is that extra thing. So you pursue that. 10 years' time, you look back and you say, wow, I discovered a lot of things I didn't know, or this was instinctive. When I was photographed people in a certain place, I wasn't even aware of how much I related to them. Yeah, I think, you know, as I said, as a photographer, you have to have a subject matter. You have to choose something to do. One thing that I didn't say, which was, again, something to do with my European experience, what you find an awful lot with people, so here's a country, when I lived here, it was an exciting place to discover things, and I didn't need to run around philosophically, I didn't need to go into the trash can in order to find ideas. But if you live in a static, closed society, you live in some parts of Europe, it's overpopulated, you don't have money to do many things, you don't have the ability to go anywhere, there isn't that much which is happening near you. You can't really, I mean, you want to get involved politically in something, and you don't have a bicycle, you have to find something within walking distance. Probably the maximum you're going to find is somebody complaining about flowers in the local park. I mean, this is not world-class stuff. This is all you've got to work with. So a lot of people there have gone along and they said, well, I'm going to make use of boredom. So there's nothing happening, so I'm going to photograph my shoes, boring shoes, but this is my message to the world, boring shoes. Boring breakfast, boring, you know. So it's a perfectly valid thing in photography to photograph the banal. You're trying to understand what happens to the human brain, which doesn't have much place to escape to. And that's become very synonymous in a lot of European society for being, this is art. Don't go out there photographing your community because that's just photojournalism. Photograph your boring shoes instead. And it's very easy to start out in photography and say, well, people are buying pictures of shoes. That's hip. You know, I don't want to be seen to be doing all this other stuff that other people do. You know, it's valid, but how valid is it? When you have, you know, really, are you losing an opportunity? That's the biggest thing in life. Not that you're doing something wrong, but are you losing an opportunity? And I think, you know, whatever is reachable and which is has meaning in itself, much more with photography than anything else, is go for the stuff that's got meaning. And don't believe the story which is to say, avoid meaning because that's not artistic. You know, don't photograph an significant subject matter because it won't look good on a gallery wall. It's a balance you need to get to. I think everybody's got a different balance, but yeah, that's my feeling. So, anybody else? Anything more to add?
So I wonder the role of text in photography. So my photography is mostly documentary photography, but I started off as a photojournalist until at some point I was quite disillusioned. And so I went more into, you know, documentary photography and portraits is what I usually do. So I found that there is a significant part of a photograph that can be given meaning by text. So a project that I'm always going back to is called Shot at Dawn. It was done by a British photographer. Her name is Chloe Dew Matthews. So it was about landscapes where soldiers who went AWOL in World War I were shot. So she would get the coordinates, she'd get the story, and she would photograph the place at dawn, present day. So she could find that the place has become, it's a wall. She would get there and it's a wall. But nobody would have known that somebody had been shot here for absconding their duties in the war. Or she'd get there and it's a beautiful field with flowers, and she would shoot just that. And then the caption would tell you that Private so-and-so was shot here at dawn, and this is what happened, and this is how it happened. So it would change the way you would look at that beautiful, you know, landscape when you would find out that somebody was shot here. Or she would go to a place and she'd find that it's maybe a cemetery or a church. And I found that approach quite interesting, that, you know, sometimes in photojournalism, it's about the story, what's happening now. But nobody ever goes back to, you know, the intricacies of what that story could have been,
So
at the time it was shot.
Are you motivated by the stories that you have in your mind, or are you motivated by the photos and then?
I think I'm motivated more by the stories that are left behind by news. So let's say there's a car accident, somebody dies, it's news for a couple of, hours or days, and it's gone. Nobody ever thinks, oh, okay, did this person have a family? What is left behind when this person, dies? So I think my motivation mostly is that what happens after news. So
Do you have a question?
So my question was, what do you think the role of text is in helping giving meaning to a photograph?
Well, I think that the question of the artistic venture is not relevant to everything. I think it's incredibly meaningful. It is a medium in itself. It is something or other. Well, the objective is plain. There's a degree of discovery in it. You're trying to find out for yourself, is there some meaning? There was an accident, what happened to the people? Is there any? So it is a legitimate social inquiry. It's a personal inquiry. I mean, unless you've done it 50 times and now you're just repeating. If I just follow every car accident for the last 20 years, I just go and ask everybody as a routine. But in which case, maybe you're discovering a bit of something yourself. The artistic side of thing, does it have a place in a gallery? Why not? I mean, a gallery is a place where you put things to be seen in a different context. It's separated from life, it's put on a wall, it's an experience which isn't just thrown in between news items. And I think also, really, I mean, the picture is worth 1,000 words. Most of the time, the picture only becomes worth something after 1,000 words are said on it. There's no absolute rule, but I think that it's a great thing to do. The main problem with all of these things is if it's done in order to communicate or in the hope of communicating, is largely, is anybody going to take any notice? If you have a current generation of people who will read about 3 words and then say, I've had enough, then it becomes a symbolic thing. I mean, most of what I do nowadays is I have 20 pages worth of text. And then you think, well, nobody's ever going to read any of that. They love it. Look, they're 20 pages of text. It must mean something. You can have an instant reaction to people. Come and look at your photos. She's got a lot to say about this. Oh, look at the picture. It means more to me, but I'm not going to read it. It's a question really of how much does this. What is the balance point where this thing actually works best? And that, again, the thing that I mentioned a long time ago about the natural home of photography, or Henry Moore's truth to material, is that what does your medium suit itself to? When do people sit down and read? In the days when you had magazines, that's exactly what people did. They read 3 pages. And they had some photos. Is there any kind of appetite for that anymore? I don't know. But in answer to that, that's good. So also you had a question? Yeah.
Those conceptual topics that are on the forefront of our right now, like issues to do climate change, issues to do geopolitics, in teaching a photo content, but maybe in an artistic way that can appeal to a certain audience. Because not many people want to want, but putting something in the context.
There's one thing to say about that, which I observed, which was the BBC, the time that I lived in Britain. It started out being a dry news medium, and then somebody said, computer graphics, let's make it visually more interesting. We'll have news titles, And then we'll have interesting artistic blends from one shot to the next. And then we'll have our newsreaders standing in an amazing space station environment. And in the end of this whole thing, it took away from the news. It became more and more kind of entertainment day. And so there's that risk that you start embellishing your stuff too much. And then it starts taking away from the message. My friend was working for Autodesk. I don't know if you know the company who do AutoCAD. Quite a few years ago. And they decided on their advertising campaign was tell the truth. This was the new idea. Just basically don't bullshit, just basically say things as they are, because embellishing them was not a good thing. So I don't know. I mean, I look nowadays, so most of the news photography that you saw from years back was shot on film. You had no shadow detail. You had grainy film. So you will see all the atmospheric pictures of Vietnam. They're strong, powerful. I mean, people went with what they were results they were going to get. Now I see pictures of death and destruction in Ukraine, and wow, the pictures are so beautiful. They should be all on a gallery wall. The light is perfect, the composition is perfect. You know, everything, the texture is wonderful. It looks like it was carefully composed on 8x10-inch film by somebody who spent hours thinking about it. And I think you reach a saturation point in terms of message. I think probably the thing that you decide is just how much is enough in terms of skill and talent and artistry. And if that's not enough, then you get some news headlines or some other way of boosting your message. I don't know if that helps. Are we coming to a time limit?
Yeah, let's just say 10 more minutes.
Yeah, okay. There were one or two themes that I was going to cover. I'm trying to think what they might be. Yeah, a lot. Well, one thing I was going to do, it's more like a gripe, but may as well mention it. It was going through my mind, which is a very interesting thing I discovered on a lot of photographic forums. I've been part of perhaps 5 or 6 fairly serious forums with top-class photographers, and on all of them, talking about photography is banned. It sounds curious. You can talk about being a photographer, you can talk about your equipment, where to buy things, how do you do something, who can I employ, what insurance company should I use, solving problems. But everybody, as soon as you start saying, I saw this beautiful picture, what I like about it is so and so and so and so, what does everybody else think? They all say, shut up, we don't want to have this on our forum. Now, I mean, I don't have an answer for this particularly, but it's an interesting kind of a thing that amongst photographers, there are certain areas, and one group said to me, oh, we don't allow it because there are always arguments. Photographers start shouting at each other and say, I like it, I don't like it. And that's not acceptable. You keep reading things about Paris, Picasso and all those people who would sit in cafes in Paris, and they would all talk about the coming styles and what they felt about creativity. And nowadays, a lot of this thing is a no-go area for photography. I don't know if there's, I think it's largely the nature of photography that quite a lot of people are going to say, well, I can't compete if we start talking about these kind of things. So nobody should talk about it, you know, or there's so many different kinds of photographers. I'm an advertising photographer, I don't have opinions. Guy tells me he wants a cleaner, crisper background. I give it to him. So I don't want to listen to somebody who others saying about all this stuff about beautiful backgrounds. I don't care. I just give what the client wants to do. Maybe that's part of the reason. The other thing is probably also to do with access. You have, how can I compete with if it's news photography, how can I compete with somebody who's in a war zone? Can I go out around here? There's an argument with somebody selling ice cream. There's going to be as dramatic a statement as somebody who's got pictures of people in battle. I started the early days photographing bush stores and so on with a big camera around here. And I arrived somewhere, I asked permission to take a picture, people came out and they stood in front of the camera. Even though it took a long time, it was spontaneous because I didn't direct anybody. People just posed. And what you found here is one guy poses like this, somebody poses like that. You have a whole group of people and it's an interesting grouping. So I tried to do the same thing in Germany and in Britain and Scotland. And every time I went somewhere where there were a group of people, I said, okay, we're going to do a group photo. And everybody stood there like this. There's nobody with any body posture, nobody smiling, just everybody stood like this, which I thought was an interesting thing about this sort of military history of European culture. But going to Burning Man or shooting pictures in the USA, it's full of European people or people of European origins. And if I put up a camera in the USA, everybody does physical posturing. I haven't an explanation for that. Saki has got any experience of the USA versus Europe thing, but I just thought that might be interesting observation. Yeah, so any last things to, oh, okay.
Just one question.
Yeah.
In your, sorry.
Yeah, John.
You're obviously still doing commercial photography now.
Yeah.
What are your personal work do you do?
What personal work do I like?
Or what you're doing?
Well, I'm doing not as much commercial photography as I would like. That's partially because I was always a special effects guy. So what I didn't say earlier was the question of doing photography to learn and photography to prove what you know. So if you contrive something, if I had to sit in an empty room and build a room set and imagine it, I would be testing what I've learned about visual life. If I go out with a camera here, I'm learning about light and all of these things. So the area of contrived photography and imaginative stuff nowadays is kind of like, it's largely cheapened with AI. Everybody say, well, I don't have to care about that sort of stuff. We just type in, give me some crazy pictures. Boom. I got plenty of crazy pictures, and why should I respect it? And the other thing is, you're an idiot. You spent 2 weeks making a contrived picture. And everybody looks at it and just said he pressed the button. Oh, well, you're an idiot. Nobody's going to give you any respect. So in the commercial world, it doesn't matter about respect, but it's whether somebody wants to pay you money. And if they don't want to pay you money because they think they could get it for free, then your prices have to go down. In terms of personal work, there's tons and tons of stuff on it's actually a blog on my website, philipchudy.com, will lead you to hundreds and hundreds of galleries. And mostly it is, I like suburbia, quiet suburban landscapes. I think it's very difficult to photograph suburbia and to capture the spirit because it's behind hedges and there's nothing really there, it's bland. The biggest thing that I've done are a series of 4 years now of spontaneous pictures at fairgrounds in the US. people dribbling ice cream and children running around and having fun. Unfortunately, nobody kills me for pointing a camera at them. They're Americans, and they say, take a picture of me. Whereas if I went to Britain and I walked around the streets with a camera, everybody would say, you're photographing children, aren't you? You know, I'll call the police on you. Or you can't photograph me, I'm copyrighted. There's a lot of aggression. So that's a big project that I've done. But I think urban landscape, the kind of crap back end of American cities interests me. Yeah.
Do you do it just for personal, or do you do it because you want to make a dollar?
Well, nobody. Nowadays, pretty much the market has gone out of everything, including, you know, assignment work is very reluctantly done. You know, we can get it from here, there, or the other. It's reluctantly, if you've got a company and you have 20 personnel and somebody leaves, you need a new picture of the new person to put on your website. So yes, then they have to get somebody in if they can't do it with their iPhone. So largely the market's gone from that. Largely the market in terms of fine arts, nobody needs pictures anymore. So I do it for no purpose whatsoever. I do it largely with a sense that nobody bothers to look. Nowadays, people are so flooded. You say to your best friend, I've just done the best work that I have a look at this gallery. Oh, I might look. Maybe not. Yeah.
I just want to know whether you have a comment on the global changing media patterns.
On the?
Global changing media patterns and technology. Looking at social media, we find that social media is quite dominating. If you compare with what actually the media does, you find that most of the work is now being done. So it's actually taken over by social media, of which sometimes the true picture does not actually come out.
Yeah, you're talking about artificial intelligence also?
Yes, exactly. Because actually it's giving much disturbance when you look at cyber terrorism and cyber crime.
Okay.
Yes, maybe you can have a diluted comment on that.
Yeah. Well, I can't comment very favorably. You know, you have to try and invent what is positive about this. The social media thing, the media has meant that pictures are. The human brain has a capacity to look at thousands and thousands of pictures, but in terms of valuing things, I think like everything else, I mean, most of our brain is involved in our visuals stuff. We walk around all day long, seeing thousands and thousands of pictures. So we have the capacity to process a lot of pictures. But social media, first of all, it's making everything anonymous. It's putting everything out of context. The attention span, there was a program on the US local talk station that I listened to a couple of days ago with some scientists who were comparing understanding text on screen, reading a book on screen compared with reading a physical book, and basically seeing how the brain operates differently. It's just trying to quickly get the information and just quickly find out what it's about and move on. And I don't think that this is any good. And the artificial intelligence stuff, the biggest problem with it is not so much. So everybody in theory wants to see intention behind art or behind photography or whatever it is. They want somebody to have chosen that for a reason. And when a machine just chooses something or other artificially, on average, It's not very satisfying. But at the same time, there's still a comparison, as I mentioned before, was if I can get a picture like that just by pressing a button saying I want a sunny beach with lots of people enjoying themselves, and it takes a great picture, compared with sending you the photographer to the beach to try and find that picture and stay there for 5 days, I'm going to devalue you. Yes, you will do a better job, but how much better? And I don't need it. And I think that's the biggest problem with this thing here is the value that people want to ascribe to it. And I think that you can probably get a bunch of people in a few instances. You can say, okay, somebody's a star, go to their exhibition, look at every picture beautifully, everybody says how wonderful. They walk out in the street and they disrespect nearly every other picture that they see because they only have space in their life for so much clear attention. And the rest of it's overpowered. So I don't know if that's my response.